People who know me know I'm a major space nerd. I've been interested in space flight my whole life. My ambition when I was like 5 was to become an astronaut. I think if my eyesight and certain other physical deficiencies hadn't been a limiting factor, I ended up being the perfect size because I'm not that tall. And certainly the interest was there. And after learning what astronauts do and how much they have to study and how much they have to know above and beyond flying a vehicle, it would have been a good fit for me. But life didn't work out that way. However, I've really become disenchanted by spaceflight as billionaires have entered the picture and, in my mind, pretty much ruined the whole thing by making it all about themselves instead of all about advancing the human condition and advancing our scientific knowledge, which is what, to me, spaceflight really is for. And I began to become a realist about it many years ago after, really falling for the whole logic trap where people say, we never thought we could break the sound barrier until we, used engineering and smarts to do it. So therefore, someday we're going to break the faster than light barrier. And, someday we're just going to be able to do all this. And I have increasingly begun to think, not really. That those things are a pipe dream. Those things are beyond our capability as a species. Maybe not permanently, but certainly for the foreseeable future. There need to be advances in areas beyond engineering and science that happen for us to ever even imagine doing something as dramatic as interstellar travel, or even colonizing another planet, or even getting to Mars. And this really hit home when I was watching an interview with Luke Talley, who is the individual who designed or ran the project for the instrumentation unit on the Apollo rocket, the big circular ring of computing equipment and sensors and such that guided the rocket into orbit. And he was being interviewed by the gentleman who runs Smarter Every Day. I think his name's Destin, who himself is the, I believe, descendant of another space engineer. So he's got the interest and he's got the background to talk about it. And, but Luke Talley's opinion of us going to Mars was that it would take 50 years of an Apollo-style program for us to do that. And I've really, looking at the kind of problems we would need to solve to put a person on Mars, and being a long-time Kerbal player and having familiarity with the math and the physical challenges that we would need to solve to accomplish such a task, I tend to agree with Luke Talley, and maybe even would say that it would take the cooperation of more than just a few people in this country, more than just the 400,000 people who had to all work towards a shared goal in order to get us to the moon. I think it would take most of the advanced nations in the world to decide that we all want to go to Mars and that we all need to work cooperatively to achieve such a goal. Just because the long-term vision that kind of thing requires would need to be spread out so that it wasn't hostage to any one nation's political, uh, comings and goings. And certainly, I don't think Elon Musk is going to do it. And, looking at his ripping through our government right now and the cost cutting he's supposedly doing, which is obviously not cutting any costs. He's just turning that money into programs for himself, it looks like to me. I can just say definitively, we are not going to do it. And certainly he is not going to do it. And that's because getting to the moon, there's a great series that's out there that I rewatch periodically when I want to feel inspired about what humans can do, called The Moon Machines. And, getting to the moon is more than just having enough go juice in your rocket to put a vehicle in the right orbit. It's a million other problems that had to be solved, from really esoteric things like the fact that they ended up having to go out and find surfers, California surfers, who understood how to put this particular material on their boards and get it to stick in order to put the insulation on the tanks so that the fuel didn't boil off, to inviting the people who made bras in to build the spacesuits because they got mechanical minded people in there who could not figure out how to make it so that a person could move in a spacesuit and still keep it pressurized and such. There were so many different kinds of specialties involved in that. So many different kinds of science. And right now, quite depressingly, that enormous body of publicly funded knowledge is being just ripped out of our country's body. It's being annihilated by budget cuts, which are supposed to make America great again. I don't know how we're going to be great without the science and technology that all these folks, especially Elon Musk, absolutely depended on to get him to where he is, and would not have an industry and would not have all of these fat government contracts if all of that science hadn't preceded him. I just don't know how we're going to move forward without that. Private industry doesn't do that kind of thing just for fun. They take research that often spent years getting nowhere and then suddenly produced a result like Ozempic was like lizard spit or something like that. It was like people researching what is this venom from snakes or lizards or something. What can that do? And that's all being annihilated right now. And all of that is necessary for us to solve the additional problems about how do we put people in space for the months at a time that it will take for them to get to Mars, the months that they will spend on Mars, which is not a safe place to be for a human being, and how will they create that community? All of that, multiple levels of biological and material and physical science and even sociological science that would allow people to survive in such extreme conditions. All of that's just being chucked. And it breaks my heart to see this being done. I don't know that we'll ever regain our position. I think the world will be in a turmoil of hurt and confusion, and honestly, it seems very dark to me. And the sci-fi future that I used to imagine we had is just, It's receding before me. We're becoming the 1950s again. We're going to be a primitive, ignorant bunch of hicks who don't see much beyond, if we even have factories. I don't even know what the hell we're going to be doing here anymore. If we even have healthcare, I don't know what we're going to be doing here anymore. If we even have any of that stuff, because just a chainsaw is being run right through the heart of everything that really did make this country great. So for people who keep jerking themselves off to this fantasy that we're going to go to Mars and Elon's somehow going to be this great leader who takes us there, it's bullshit. It is not going to happen. It's not just, I have done the math on Starship, and it's a completely impractical toy. The publicly distributed numbers on it prove it's just barely got enough go to get into orbit, if it can ever even do that without exploding. I'll be shocked if it does. But also, once it's there, he's going to need to launch possibly a dozen other rockets to refuel it. And, that stuff boils off. So, fire it off at the moon, and the fuel might last long enough to get there and land. Fire it off at Mars. Liquid methane and liquid oxygen, somehow keeping it from boiling off through the system for 8 months seems. I don't know what the boil off rate is, and the research that it would take to really fix those cryogenic problems isn't going to happen haphazardly. It's going to take a focused, concentrated effort to understand what to do. And the people who would do that are being thrown out of their lives and thrown out of their jobs, and who knows where they'll go, and who knows where that knowledge will go. It certainly won't get used for free by us. And the people who are doing this right now don't respect that kind of knowledge. They don't respect the abstract knowing of a thing just to understand it. And it's very clear they don't understand how much daydream kind of science led to us being able to put a rocket in space in the first place. How much impractical at the time type research. Goddard was mocked and derided throughout his life. I don't think he ever got any respect for what he was trying to do. It was, late into, I don't even know for sure if he lived to see real rockets fly, but I know at the time he was originally working, it was just silliness as far as the newspapers and the press and all those people were concerned. The 1920s and 1930s kind of people were just, making fun of him. And so I don't see that happening at all. If he can ever get the damn thing into orbit, it's just going to go around in circles. It's because then, let's say he gets it fueled up, it can go. I think if you're being really amazingly generous, you could say, well, it could probably get to Mars. What would arrive in the space of Mars? We don't know. He would need to take something along that didn't boil off or decay. He would have to add another fuel system, a hypergolic type fuel system. And how would those people live all that time? People have been in space for that length of time with regular supply, flights taking care of them, and a whole team of people on the ground making sure they stay alive. If that's all ripped out, first off, what are they supposed to do? and how are they going to train for that kind of thing? That was actually what there were multiple trainings or multiple projects that happened in the last 30 years that have tried to answer that question. What would it be like for people to be isolated like that for that long? And it's not good for their health, mental or otherwise. And in zero G, with nothing but, the spaceship, that, he hasn't proposed rotating the ship. It's not big enough to create a good, centripetal force type arrangement, so that they can, like in 2001, where they had the ring in the Discovery. I mean, it needs to be about 3 times bigger to even do something like that effectively. And it needs to be powered by something that, again, doesn't just evaporate, boil off into space. Because even, pulling away from the Earth, once it's out of the Earth's shadow, it's in full sunlight for weeks. Full sunlight for weeks and months. Even though it's getting a little further away all the time, it's out there in full sunlight. Just hammering away at the surface of the ship. There's this whole system that had to be developed for the James Webb Space Telescope, the t-shirt I'm wearing right now, that keeps it cool because it's in full sunlight. It's not like in the shadow of the Earth or the moon. It's way too far away for that, and it's not even close to where those things are anyway. It's orbiting the Lagrange point. I have real concerns about the support staff for that being just abruptly cut because, these clowns don't understand what it takes to keep something like that running. So the idea that if you're a Musk fan and you think, oh yeah, we'll be going to Mars soon because he's got that. He's in there now. He can direct the space program. I got another thing coming for you. We're not going anywhere. Not with this attitude. This deeply anti-science, anti-progress, anti-understanding. There's the list of banned words that they don't want people saying makes research impossible. Just that alone will end any chance of a rational project that could possibly solve this problem. And their insistence that, only certain people can be allowed to do this kind of work because everyone else is inferior. That also is just going to exclude all kinds of talent. And it ain't going to happen. If Starship ever gets into Earth orbit, I will be shocked. If it ever then leaves Earth orbit, I will also be shocked. I will find a hat and eat it. And I will eat it on this YouTube channel. Because it's a very impractical, impressive looking toy. And the people now making the major decisions behind it do not have the state of mind, the focus, or the open-mindedness to look at this problem realistically and solve the myriad of unanswered questions about how are we going to do this that must be answered before we just haphazardly launch a person in a giant steel can off towards Mars. And, I know that, and I've done many a Mars-style mission as a long-time Kerbal player. And whenever I do one of them, I'm always like, I'm glad the game just sort of takes care of things like where's the food come from and how do these people keep themselves from losing their minds, sitting in a little tiny chair for months at a time, because those problems are gigantic. And The idea that they're just going to zoom off and go do it like they're in some kind of 90s Bruce Willis kind of movie. It's just absurd. Not only do I not think we will do this within my lifetime or the lifetime of anyone currently breathing, I also do not think we will do it within the lifetime of this nation, possibly even within the span of the current form of the English language. Maybe not even then. And that's the kind of thing that changes over periods of like hundreds of years. Like English has been what it is for about 500 years. If you go back much further than that, and you try to read what people in England were writing, it starts to look pretty funny. And it starts to sound pretty funny. So I don't think we are a whole civilizational epoch away from achieving this goal, in my opinion. It is something that we are not ready to do on any level right now. And with the amount of hostility and our leader looks like he's gearing us up for some kind of ridiculous war, and that we might possibly be in more than one. You know how well that ends for nations that pull that kind of stunt. I just don't see it happening anytime soon. I think we as a civilization worldwide must evolve significantly towards a cooperative way of life before we could pull something like that off. It is not something that a handful of self-professed geniuses can just yank out of their hind end. It is a monumental task. And that's just getting there. Living there, I don't even think that's reasonable. The more, I mean, I was watching Carl Sagan talk about how we could terraform Mars back when, it was being broadcast on Cosmos in the 1980s. And that there was so much we did not know about the environment on Mars back then that we now realize it's a very, very, very difficult ask. And I just think that, we may have landed on the moon way, way too soon as a species. It's a brilliant accomplishment. It inspired me as a child. I was alive for all of the moon landings. I wasn't really aware of them, but they were in our consciousness as a country as I grew up. And no, we didn't doubt it had happened. That didn't come until later when people wanted to make money off of saying, obvious lies and stuff. But, it was quite a feather in our cap. But it ultimately didn't, and it created the industry that kind of gave me a job and makes all these computer toys work. All that came from the rush to miniaturize a computer so that it could get on a rocket. And tons of other things were created by the space program. It was incredibly fruitful time. And all of that research is now being shit canned because to give tax cuts to to incredibly wealthy people. And really, until we get over this need to have incredibly wealthy people get whatever they want, we aren't going to progress much further. That is, in my considered opinion, the main thing that's going to keep us from moving on as a society is incredibly wealthy people and their very, very selfish needs. And they are not going to be the ones who take us to a new space age. This is effectively, to me, the end of the space age. This last election pretty much killed the very scientific culture that got us there in the first place. And we are going to be entering a post-space age society where it's possible to launch stuff, sure. But we're probably going to be restricted to low Earth orbit. And they keep filling it up with garbage, so it may not even be something we can get to, because the will to shepherd and take care of that resource is gone. We've got a bunch of basically children running the show now, and they're gonna frick it up. And I just fully expect we're gonna have a Kessler event at some point here, and then that may be the end of that fun too. So if you were a fan of space travel, and I no longer give a shit when a rocket is launched. I'm just like, whatever. Like, I'm sure there's going to be a few more missions that are in the chute for NASA, but the way they're ripping through everything, I would not get excited about any further space travel or any of that. And the way they're ripping into everything that they don't like, the records and all of that knowledge may be soon, if it's not outside of the control of the U.S. government, it may soon be selectively poisoned and destroyed by ridiculous zealots who don't understand what they're destroying. Which makes me very sad. I grew up during a time when we, the United States, explored every single world in our sky that was in the solar system. Every one of those planets during my lifetime. Most of them for the first time. I think the only things I was not around for the first exploration of were a couple of missions to Mars, and of course the early probes to the moon. But most of that happened while I was growing up. So I got to learn about our solar neighborhood in real time from the news instead of out of a textbook. Now, and I genuinely am glad that probably all that information that's really important has been disseminated and is in textbooks around the world, and that other nations can guard and keep that data for the future, because I'm genuinely afraid that it's going to be eradicated if it doesn't meet certain criteria. People who follow the history of science may wish to revisit the concept of Lysenkoism and Deutsche Physik, because that's the era we're about to enter is Trump Physik and RFKoism. And I'm very frightened for where we're going as a country with anti-science nut jobs in charge. But any fantasy that you had about us going to Mars, you should forget about that, because with these people in charge, it's never going to happen.